And it's so beautiful to see, I don't know, that there's a space, especially for youth. Like, if you can see it, you can be it.
Yes, you hit it right on the mark, Natalia. That really is it. And for us, like growing up here, we immigrated in 1989. I immigrated March 1989, and Sergio immigrated December 1989.
Hmm.
And we've gone to school together. We met in middle school, and we never saw ourselves in
Yeah.
any of the spaces that we were in, not in school, not in the organizations.
Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of Heritage Choir. My name is Natalia Romero Belaez, and I'm really excited to bring you the final episode of Season 2. This episode features an organization called Indigenous Roots. Indigenous Roots is a nonprofit based out of the east side of St. Paul with a mission to uplift and celebrate Indigenous culture. I got to speak with MaryAnne Quiroz, who is one of the founders and directors of this organization, and she shared what makes her organization so special. Throughout this episode, you're also going to get to hear directly from three youth involved in Indigenous Roots. They're going to share a little bit about their art and a little bit about their music. I asked them to tell me, how does your culture drive and motivate your art? And this is what they had to say. A quick note, two of the students are actually Harding High School alums, where I work and teach, and one of them was actually in my choir program for a couple of years. It was really special to get to see the student that I know and love kind of shining and working in another area of her life. Without further ado, I present to you Indigenous Roots.
Bonjour and Dinaway Maganiduk, Misko Gimiwan Indigenous Cause. Hello, my relatives. My name is Misko Gimiwan, and what motivates to drive my art is learning to reconnect to my roots and revitalizing my language and culture so I can pass it on to the next generation. So I'm going to be singing a song, and it's a contemporary native song. Hey, oh, hey, way, ha, hi, oh, hey. Hey, oh, hey, way, ha, hi, oh, hey. Ha, oh,
Hi,
ho,
magandang
way,
hapon sa inyo
ha,
lahat. My name is MaryAnne Quiroz. I am a
hey,
mama first and foremost, an islander mama, immigrant of the Philippines. I am also the co-founder and co-director of Indigenous Roots Cultural Arts Center, located here in the east side of St. Paul. I'm also a co-founder and co-director of the Mexica Nawa Azteca group Calpulia Senochli with my partner Sergio Senoch Quiroz and our 5 babies.
Why did you and Sergio start Indigenous Roots?
Um, Really, the kind of the origin story of Indigenous Roots really came about the need and the desire of having a home base, a home space where we could do our ceremonies, and not just for our group, but also for like many other groups here in the Twin Cities, cultural groups, and also artists that didn't necessarily have spaces or could find accessible spaces. So for us, we were already networking, building a network of artists and organizers that self-identify as brown, black, native, indigenous here in the Twin Cities. And we just figured, it was something that we all needed to kind of just collectively come together and begin to create.
So, is the mission of Indigenous Roots more about creating that collaborative space, or is it about uplifting some of the community partners that you work with? Tell me more.
It's all of the above. So one of our main missions, main goals always is to provide accessible space, opportunities, and resources for Black, Brown, Native, and Indigenous artists, organizers, activators here in the Twin Cities. We understand that, historically, accessible spaces and resources haven't been the most, has not been distributed equitably. And so we're here to, like what you said, just lift up, our community partners, lift up people who have been marginalized or have not had accessible spaces. And so for us, it was just really important that we strive towards that and to build community power with one another. And honestly, we just wanted a space that we could feel at home, that we didn't have to, you know turn down the volume of the drums, or
Mm-hmm.
that we could have a space where we can burn our copal or our sage or a cedar. And so I think for us it's just finding a home, but a bigger space of home, so that we can gather in larger spaces together. So yeah.
I work on the East Side, and so I often drive by Indigenous Roots, and you opened the Cultural Arts Center in 2017. And I think one of the most striking things about that is the artwork. I mean, when you see it, it's just a beautiful space. Tell me more about going from founding this organization, about connecting with artists, connecting with community people, and then, you know, having this physical space, this cultural arts center.
The location where we're at right now at 788 East 7th Street, we opened the doors there in May 2017, and really proud of how that came about because we had intergenerational contributions in there. You know, we had our elders getting blessings from our elders and really have powerful, strong youth voice and youth perspective contributed in that space. And so since 2017, I want to say we've had international artists from different continents, even South Africa, and just different places, and locally here as well. So having that balance of having local artists and out-of-town artists is something that we want to make sure we create space for. And also just as soon as the doors opened, literally physically, when the doors opened, it also opened the doors to create more networks to different artists all over the world and here locally, and from emerging artists, people who are self-taught artists, to folks who are like, nope, this is something that I was raised in and I was born into, and is their professional career as an artist. So it's just nice to have a lot of spectrum about with people's artistry and art forms.
Hearing you talk about this, it's so clear that this is a community organization. You hear sometimes like, oh, we're community centric, but I know, just even the way that you're talking about these connections and these networks and the youth and the elders and how you're empowering people to share who they are, whether it comes from an academic background or it's just you speaking your truth through your art form. I love that. I love that mission, and I love that we have something like that, especially on the East Side.
Mm-hmm.
MaryAnne, did we meet at Beta's grad party?
We did.
That's what I thought. Okay.
We did. I was like, I know her, but I didn't want to be like a stalker or anything. But yeah, we did. It's and Beta's still in our dance group, and she's out there in the world adulting, like has her own place now and working and things like that. So yeah.
And I just remember, I had Beta in choir, and when she joined choir, she's like, I did choir in middle school, and I was like, well, I think you were placed in the wrong class. This is the advanced group, and like students usually start in the beginning group, and she's like, no, I'm gonna be here.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make it work. And I was like, all right, let's make it work.
Yeah.
And Beta, just from the get-go, I just loved how she at all times was unapologetically herself.
Yes.
And she was both, right? She was Mexica, and she like brought that in. She invited me, actually. I went to one year to the day at Johnson, her dance event.
Oh, the New Year festival.
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
And it was just so cool to like see her and see the pride she had, and to see a student who, I loved and I had in choir, but just to see that side of her where you could tell she was just like up there, shining.
Yeah, and that's what we really want, like especially for our youth, who are of mixed background, because I have mixed babies myself, right? They're Filipino and Mexica, and we identify as Indigenous as a family. And so to have our youth be of mixed cultures, sometimes they feel like they're not enough for one culture or one family, and they have to code switch all the time, and then being raised here where Western society is like the dominant culture. So I feel really proud when I see our youth being able to embody their truest selves and all of their selves, like all the different pieces and traditions and cultural backgrounds that they have.
Bonjour, Nishi Gikano Magni Dog Marisol Dinisi Cortez Indigenous. Hola, soy Elvira Marisol Capetillo Cortez. My Ojibwe name is Dindisi, which is Blue Jay. Right here I have one of my pieces. I want to talk to you today about one of my biggest motivations for art. Is definitely my mom and my dad. They've taught me everything that I've ever learned in life. My mom was very creative, and my dad was always finding ways to make things work, which really inspired me always to never give up and keep trying, even when I do notice that my art isn't exactly the way I want it, I keep doing it, and I try to remind myself that nothing's gonna be perfect, and it's the way it is because that's how it's supposed to be. But I take a lot of inspiration from the things that I enjoy, which is dancing and singing, and also just a lot of nature, like animals especially. I take like a lot of pride with animals. There's a deep connection with them. I just feel like they're really sacred, and I appreciate them a lot, and I just really like to show that through my art.
Speaking about artists, I know that you have a ton of artists on your website and your page that you collaborate with. What do those collaborations look like? Is just Indigenous Roots a hub for those artists, or?
Yeah, so for our partnerships, really, it's really making it work for both, right? Like where they are at their artistry and what level that they're in. So if it's like, hey, so an example of one of our really strong partnerships right now is Awairu Nakuna, which is the director is Leighton Guaipa, who is of Ecuadorian background, and so he provides, teaches, preserves traditional Ecuadorian dances and philosophy and teachings. And so we actually met him many years ago, and this is a young man, like in his 20s, and to see someone have so much pride and be able to take on that role, right? So he felt like it was like, oh man, like he was doing it with his family, but then he saw that it was lacking in the larger Ecuadorian community here in the Twin Cities. So to be able to take on like, I'm gonna do this, and it's not like it was a paid gig. He's doing it out of his own like passion and like drive. And so now what we've been able to do is like connect him with grants. His classes take place on the weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, and have been able to really level up his artistry. I mean, I can't even say art, because many indigenous cultures, there's no word for art. It's just our way of life, right? Like this is just our way of life. We don't even call it our art. It's our way of life. And for Leighton, this was his way of life that he was actually able to bring together and share with family and community. And so that's one of the partnerships we have. We have another partnership with Native Pride dancers. Well, they'll come here and there, and they'll use the space to do their online classes or online workshops, and so, or their online residencies. So it really just depends on what artists need, and we try to be able to provide that space or that resource that they need to continue doing the work that they do.
And so, for a community person wanting to get involved, is it more that these artists publish a schedule of classes or events, and then community people can say, oh, I want to learn about this, and then they just show up and join? Or how can community members engage?
Pretty much. We've received, messages in our social media through Facebook or Instagram. We received emails and voicemails, and most folks, like on our website, like it has a list of our community partners and our collaborations, and there's different groups on there. So people either contact them directly or come through us, and then we just make that connection. And most of the time we just tell people to come show up. We have, tons of stuff going on, both physically and virtually. We're still doing a lot of things in the virtual realm due to the quarantining and the pandemic, and just trying to stay safe. And so, yeah.
It's so beautiful to see, I don't know, that there's a space, especially for youth. Like if you can see it, you can be it.
Yes, you hit it right on the mark, Natalia. That really is it. And for us, like growing up here, we immigrated in 1989. I immigrated March 1989, and Sergio immigrated December 1989. And we've gone to school together. We met in middle school, and we never saw ourselves in any of the spaces that we were in, not in school, not in the organizations. We were rec center kids. So I would go to the rec center after school. But even then, there was no arts and culture. There was no way to like kind of reconnect, reclaim, or continue in that way. So I'm really glad that I think this is just part of that. Indigenous Roots is just kind of like stepping up to fill that need that community has asked for or has verbalized, into space. And really glad that we're able to be a part of that solution, or at least for the time being. We don't know how long this is gonna be for, and really our main thing is to provide what's needed and what's requested for the time being. Things change and things evolve.
But the impact stays.
Mm.
If the org, ends, and I hope it doesn't, but I'm just saying, like, if you decide to move into something else, at some point you're going to have a youth that was like, when I was 14, I was involved in this thing, and that like lit that light inside of me and said, this is it, this is you, right? This is your truth. And it gives, I think I talk about with my students all the time about, it's hard when you don't have permission to live your truth. It's hard to not have permission to live authentically, because you're code switching, right? Or you're trying to fit a mold. But when someone says, just do it, like, this is beautiful, this is valuable, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like, my culture is an asset. My culture is my superpower.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And that's what we hope everybody can kind of walk in and walk out with whenever they're at the center, or when they're connecting with people. And I think one of the most powerful things that I've seen with my own eyes happen at the center is the intersectional work, like being able to learn about one another. How can brown folks support Black liberation? How can we all support Native Lives Matter and land back? And how can we support immigrant rights, and justice? And so finding that intersectionality, and I think that's one of the biggest assets. I feel like, for me, receiving this connection, this intersectional solidarity between so many different groups, so many different artists of different backgrounds, and just helping us create more consciousness and collective awareness, will really help, build a better next generation for us. You talk about young people seeing themselves. We have some young folks in our group who I met when they were like 12, 13, 14, and they're now in their 20s. So I've been in these kids' lives for like a decade now. And so they were able to actually see the doors open at the cultural center.
Wow.
They put their sweat equity in there, right? They go in there and clean, or help Sergio with like remodeling projects. And so to be able for them to really create this as their home. So it's not Sergio and MaryAnne Center or whatever. It's the Villages Center. It's all of ours. So I always, when we walk in there, or when people want to use a space, we always say, make yourself at home, and this is your space. Take care of it. Take good care of it, because it's not just a building; it's a living entity. So every person that brings their energy in there, it's in the space. It's what builds the space. So, yeah.
Wow. At this point, I ask people, like, what makes your organization stand out? But it's like, oh my God, we'd have to recap the past 25 minutes. It's so clear that you have this vision that's so collaborative and inviting, and it just says, come, right? Come as you are, and come share who you are. MaryAnne, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, just come. We are lucky enough to have many talented, powerful, fierce youth and young folks at Indigenous Roots who are there day in and day out, from taking part in organizing events, or taking classes, giving classes. And so the two youth that I have graciously accepted the invitation to share a little bit of song with you. The first one is Kelly Celaya, who I actually recently met in response to all of the George Floyd protests, rallies, and so we were able to connect in that way. And Kelly is of Mexican descent and has a beautiful, powerful voice, kind heart. And so she is actually sharing a song from Santa Cecilia.
Hola a todos, me llamo Kelly Celaya. Hi everyone, my name is Kelly. Lo que me motiva a expresarme es mi comunidad y ver sus propias formas de expresarse, porque es un modo de resistencia. Mi canto va a ser la Santa Cecilia, se llama Ice el Hielo y es de el problema inmigratorio que tenemos aquí.
MaryAnne, thank you so much for taking time to share your story and share your organization. I really appreciate this chance to chat with you and share a little bit about Indigenous roots with our communities.
No, thank you for having us here, and thank you to Border Crossings and all the crew over there, and hope our paths cross again soon.
Absolutely.